We definitely got further and further away from society, and all of us knew that our way of life had to be concealed.
Welcome to Ms. Mojo, and today we're looking at the horrifying true story of Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey.
That changed everything because it sent Warren on the run. He knew he was in trouble because the heat was increasing here in Arizona and in Utah.
For this video, we'll be delving into the facts behind Netflix's shocking docuseries about the fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its president, Warren Jeffs. Did you watch the series? What did you think? Let us know in the comments. The Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, FLDS, drew national attention in the late 2000s, when its leader was put on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list. The police raids and trials that followed made international news.
Warren Jeffs has been particularly agitated today when it comes to some of the evidence that's been presented regarding his personal journals and writings and some of the documents that were admitted into evidence today.
Although over a decade has passed, the FLDS has experienced renewed public scrutiny in the wake of the 2022 Netflix docuseries, Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey. Described as a real-life Handmaid's Tale, the series exposes the crimes, corruption, and horrifying culture of this polygamist cult.
We didn't really leave our property in Salt Lake City. We didn't go to movies, we didn't go to theme parks or any kind of large gathering places. So there wasn't a lot of exposure to the outside world.
A splinter group of the Mormon Church, the movement was founded by men who'd been excommunicated for continuing to practice polygamy.
Polygamy is not a protected constitutional right. Plural marriage, polygamy, it's illegal, but as a practical matter, it is almost never prosecuted.
Under pressure, the Mormon Church had advised against polygamy in 1890 so that Utah would be granted statehood. When some members continued to enter into plural marriages regardless, the church issued the Second Manifesto in 1904, threatening them with excommunication. Claiming that God wanted them to have multiple wives, excommunicated members went on to form their own community in Short Creek, now Colorado City, Arizona, in the 1930s.
The FLDS split from the mainstream Mormon church a century ago and settled in Short Creek, isolated in the desert, where they could practice polygamy and follow their fundamentalist faith undisturbed.
The community also included the nearby town of Hilldale in Utah. The church had incredibly strict rules for members, who lived in relative isolation from the rest of society. When Warren Jeffs took over leadership in the 2000s, these rules became even more draconian. Women were forced to wear long prairie dresses that covered every inch of their bodies, and their hair had to be drawn back in a bun. They were reportedly made to pray every hour. In fact, the docuseries titled Pray and Obey comes from a brick pattern featured on one of the community's buildings.
The wives were required to pray every hour, getting down on their hands and knees and holding hands. Talking was not permitted.
On the chimney it says pray and obey.
Right.
And that's the message you'd see every day.
Women had two purposes only: to be submissive wives and procreate. They were controlled and coerced, forced into underage marriages, and made to engage in non-consensual acts.
I felt like this is everything that we were told was bad. Why is a man doing this, let alone the prophet of God doing this to me?
Members were taught to keep sweet, which essentially meant to tamp down their emotions and do as they were told.
Keep sweet, no matter what. That's the road to perfection.
Girls who were considered unruly were married off in order to subdue them. In many cases, the men they were married to were significantly older. Warren Jeffs arranged all the marriages and controlled physical contact between husbands and wives.
It's what's called the placement principle. You didn't court and decide who you were going to marry. Only the prophet could choose who you married.
He decided which men were allowed to father children, and punished male followers by reassigning their wives, children, and homes to other men. He himself reportedly had around 78 wives, although some have claimed 87, 24 of whom were underage at the time of their marriage.
Told me that the prophet has called, and my name was brought up, and I was to be married. But not to Joe.
Punishments for breaking the rules were dire and could include being kicked out of the community and even one's home, without a dime or any knowledge of life beyond the cult.
Warren Jeffs was kicking young boys out of the FLDS, literally leaving them homeless.
In the Netflix series, women who escaped the cult bravely speak out about their harrowing experiences under Jeffs' authoritarian rule.
Warren had a saying, perfect obedience is led by a hair. Meaning, a hair is so thin, and true obedience meant that you could be led by a hair, and you would not break it.
Much of the docuseries focuses on the man at the center of these horrifying accounts, Warren Jeffs. But who is he, and how did he come to hold such intense and terrifying power?
Mother Marilyn always told the story about how Warren was close to death at birth, and that previous prophets came to her and revealed to her that he would survive and that Warren would be a very special person.
Warren Jeffs took over leadership of the church from his father, who died in 2002. He consolidated his power by marrying most of his father's widows.
Warren started marrying his own mothers after Rowan died. That was really messed up. That was hard for people like me to swallow, and there's a lot of people that had a problem with that. I mean, who marries your mom?
Under his rule, the cult became even more cut off from the outside world. He even ordered that children be pulled from public schools and homeschooled instead.
Warren stood up in church and announced that they needed to shut down the public schools because we had to associate with apostates too much.
Expelling dozens of senior followers, including the Short Creek mayor, Jeffs achieved total control and started aggressively exploiting young girls.
I wasn't scared of death. I was scared of disobeying the prophet. Think about what I said, because I would have rather died than disobey.
As one survivor explains, Jeffs completely isolated them. They didn't know a life beyond the cult walls. He called himself a prophet and declared that all his decisions came from God. However, one of the cult's victims, Elisa Wall, bravely blew the whistle. She had been forced to marry her cousin as a minor.
I was quite defiant, and I will not do this. I cannot do this. I cannot marry him.
In 2005, Jeffs was indicted by a grand jury, but he was nowhere to be found. He'd gone on the run, becoming one of the FBI's most wanted criminals.
By this point, Warren's basically a seasoned fugitive with cell phones and masks and disguises and credit cards and prepaid phone cards. He knew how to travel on the road.
Reportedly, he continued to rule from afar, instructing his followers to send him money that was brought to him by his brother Seth. Supposedly, Jeffs, who had fled with some of his wives, used that cash on extravagant trips and fancy parties. Ultimately, he was arrested during a routine traffic check in Las Vegas.
And he said, Warren's been caught. I was a little bit at disbelief at first, and I remember asking, are you sure it's Warren? And when it became evident it was, I started to get fearful.
It's important to note that this was far from the church's first run-in with the law. In 1953, Arizona State Police officers and National Guard soldiers raided the community, arresting everyone, including 236 children. 150 were not returned to their parents for over 2 years, while others were permanently removed from their parents' custody. However, the church continued regardless, leaving history to repeat itself.
Do you all remember the day of the raid?
Yes.
I heard there were men with guns. Did you see people with guns?
Yes.
In April 2008, federal law enforcement agents raided the community's compound in West Texas. Over 400 children were removed in what became the largest child custody case in U.S. history.
When the judge ordered those kids to be taken off the ranch, no one knew there were that many of them. There were 300, 400, 500 kids out there. And suddenly, Texas had a tiger by the tail.
However, a court of appeals ruled that Child Protective Services had to return the children to the compound due to insufficient evidence.
The Texas Supreme Court has ruled that all the children should be returned to their parents.
Later that year, 12 FLDS men were charged with offenses related to underage marriages, and 6 were eventually convicted of felonies. Meanwhile, Jeffs was held in prison for 2 years while awaiting his trial. There were several delays, but in 2011 he was finally sentenced to life in prison. Between 2007 and 2011, there was some confusion over who was now in charge of the church. In 2007, Jeffs' attorneys released a statement declaring he had resigned as president. He announced William E. Jessup as his successor. However, he reasserted legal control in 2011 and continued to run the cult from prison.
And the minute he comes out, there's women there start taking notes and writing everything he says down from the moment he starts talking. So he has means of getting information out of the prison.
Today, Jeffs is incarcerated in a unit near Palestine, Texas. He won't be eligible for parole until at least July 2038, by which time he'll be 82 years old. Supposedly, he still believes he was wrongly convicted and has many supporters who agree. These days, FLDS numbers have dwindled, but remarkably, the cult is still around, although it keeps a low profile. Its devotees believe that Jeffs is a wrongly incarcerated prophet, and there are offshoot communities in Mexico and Oklahoma.
Still thousands and thousands of FLDS members.
The church's compound in Texas was seized by the state in 2014, having been deemed contraband as a place that had been used to facilitate criminal conduct.
Basically, the government went in and basically declared that it was being used for criminal enterprise, and therefore they have seized it, and there's no FLDS living there at all.
Another of Jeffs' compounds in Phoenix, Arizona, was obtained by his former wife, Brielle Decker, who managed to escape the cult. With Pastor Luke W. Barnett, she transformed the mansion into a refuge for people in need, including former members of the FLDS.
She says she wants to be there for others who flee the church.
Netflix's docuseries tells the story of these women and their suffering under FLDS control. The director, Rachel Dretzen, explained that she wanted to show how brave and badass they were for leaving everything they knew behind and starting over. This is their story. Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from Ms. Mojo. And be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.
How are y'all beautiful souls? And welcome back at Tino Talks. Today I'm gonna be talking about the Mormons. The Mormons are a cult where it's a cult where the woman has to do what the man says, and the man can have as many wives as they feel like it. They can be married as young as 15 years old to any man, and the father of the child. When the child comes to the father, she can go be like, yeah, I'm ready, and meet the father, and then they basically after that they get married. So one of the biggest things I was seeing, and this is also on Netflix, guys, it's called Pray and Obey. I do apologize if I got it wrong, guys. This code, what it does, you can't say, the woman can't say anything, and who is in charge they consider him a prophet. So this is also one of the things the children does. They taught us as a very young age is the men are the rulers. The men are the best and everything. And this is one of the most extraordinary things is the Mormons. And the Mormons are very, very cruel because they teach their children, the female children, they need to obey a man. Then when they have a male, after a certain age, they can get married to even their own sister. So they keep it on going in the family. They are not allowed to speak to anyone on the outside. They're not allowed to do anything else. They're not allowed to make contact with anyone on the outside. They're not allowed to listen to certain music. They're not allowed to look at certain toys. They're very, very strict with this. This type of code is just very crucial, guys. And this is one of the most crucial things, and this still happens today. And recently I was reading, not reading, but hearing about Chef Warren, which he ended up having 30 wives, and all particularly they were almost related to him. And his wives were getting younger and younger. And this is just a prime example of what's going on. So one of the most extraordinary things is even food. They tell you what kind of foods they're allowed to eat, what not allowed to eat, and whatever he says, the message he has is what they might have to do. They have to do it like he says.
I like it.
So one of the most extraordinary things that happens with this cult is they make the rule. It's just one certain color, which is white, and they make a man the ruler. And Chef Warren was one of the most crucial ones because he was starting to become very, very crucial, and he's the most famous one of them all. If you look into his story, he was regulating how to dress and all that stuff. Women had to dress in long dresses. They barely can have anything showing. It's just vertically their face. So this looks like seriously like an old town, old school way. Like, you know, when the woman has to be covered with a completely. Can't wear what they want. They have to be dressed a certain way. And when they ask for you, you have to go, and they have to go in there and present yourself, because he was the prophet. And this is one of the most extraordinary things, guys. And this happens today, and there's still cults just exactly like this. Mermaids are very, very crucial cult, guys, that we have to be on the lookout for, because when you get into that type of cult, then it's like you're really street from the real world, and you have to be more careful, guys, because you know sometimes this type of cults, it's just regulate your whole entire life, and you only taught one thing, guys. And this is one of the saddest things, guys, because this is like, it tells you what to eat, how to eat, when you can shower, when to spend time. It's just very, very strict. It's like you're just under a ruler. A king tells you when to eat and all that stuff, when to use the restroom and all that stuff. It's like, this is just very, very much, guys. Like, to the fact that Chef Warren, they was not allowing no hugs, no physical contact, no nothing like that. It's like, this is very crucial. This is a very crucial cult, guys. And this is one of the saddest things, because it still happens. There's still cults like that. There's still Mormons exist today, and they believe they're gods. They believe their fate is, you know, and nobody can see what it says in their Bible. Only them, and you have to go by what he says or what, and you have to pray in a certain way and all that stuff. And then you only, to the point it gets to, they have to make their own music, because they don't allow music. There's been people that actually escaped on it, and there's the stories behind it, and they're very, very cruel. This is a real thing, guys. This is called polygamy, and this is one of the most crucial things, guys, that has been happening. It happens. It still happens in today, guys. There's still females, men, and that type of cult. They're being held there. Sometimes they're being even taken against their own families, the outside, and make them forced into that. Because that's one of the most crucial cults you can be It's so and tight, guys. If you guys, if you were enjoying a cult like that, basically you become a slave. You guys basically you have no way to even contact the outside and all that. You can't even make phone calls and all that. Even to the hospitals, they don't even say so. It's okay. You imagine this kind of cruelty, and this is what they're teaching their kids. They're teaching the children very young age. So when they grow up, they have this type of mentality. You have to bow down. It has to be certain in a certain way. This is one of the most crucial cults, guys, and I know I have said this several times, but you guys have to realize this cult can be, it's just destroying from the reality. Because now that person saying, they're a prophet, they're God, and all that stuff, when it's not true. When you can't have water and stuff like that. To the point they even have they let companies like Walmart even utilize them for free labor. Guys, if you have any type of information or you know a little bit more, don't forget, you can comment on it. Let me know what you guys think about it. Because polygamy is a real thing. More is a really tortured thing, guys. People suffer and they go through bad experiences through here. And it's hard to be open-minded, and it's hard to be strong-minded to even escape, to even realize this is not how it's supposed to be. To escape that type of world. Let me know, guys, what you guys think, what you realize, guys.